I was 19 years old when I set foot on Guadalcanal in September of 1942, barely 3 weeks after the initial landing, and I'd been a Marine for exactly 7 months counting boot camp at Paris Island. My name's Robert Mitchell, but everyone called me Mitch, and I was a private first class in Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 1st Marines, holding a Thompson submachine gun that weighed almost 11 pounds and felt like freedom and death all wrapped together in blued steel and walnut. The weapon had been issued to me 2 days before we boarded the transport, replacing my M1 Garand, and my platoon sergeant, a Texan named Harkness with a scar across his left cheek, told me to learn it fast because I'd be walking point on patrols. "The Thompson's for men who get close," he said while showing me how to clear a jam. "You're going to get real close to the Japs out there, and when you do, you want 30 rounds of .45 caliber persuasion." He wasn't smiling when he said it, and looking back now, 80 years later, with hands that still shake when it rains, I understand why. Harkness had been at Wake Island and seen things that turned his eyes into something hard and distant, like he was always looking at something the rest of us couldn't see yet. The first thing that hit me when we climbed down the cargo nets into the Higgins boats wasn't fear. It was the smell. Even before we reached the beach, maybe a mile out, you could smell Guadalcanal, this thick, rotten sweetness of jungle vegetation mixed with something else I couldn't identify then, but learned was the smell of death baking in tropical heat. The island looked beautiful from the water, all green mountains rising into clouds, coconut palms along the shore, the kind of place you'd see in a travel magazine before the war. But that beauty was a lie, just wrapping paper over something that wanted to kill you in about 50 different ways. We hit Red Beach in the afternoon, and by the time we'd hauled our gear up past the tree line, my uniform was already soaked through with sweat, and I could feel things crawling on my skin. Mosquitoes the size of houseflies, some kind of mites that burrowed under your clothes, ants that bit like cigarette burns. Corporal Davis, a guy from Ohio who'd been there since the August landing, told me to get used to it, because the bugs were the least of our problems. "Wait till you get your first case of dysentery," he said, adjusting his boondocker boots. "You'll be shitting blood and praying the Japs don't hit you while you're squatting in a hole." He was right about that too. Within a week, half our company was dealing with some kind of intestinal horror, and you learned real fast to tell the difference between stomach cramps you could ignore and stomach cramps that meant you had about 30 seconds to find somewhere private. Henderson Field was maybe a mile inland from where we set up, and you could hear planes taking off and landing all day and night, our Wildcats and Dauntlesses going up to hit Japanese positions or intercept their bombers coming down from Rabaul. The airfield was the whole reason we were there, the whole reason the Japanese wanted us dead, and at night you'd see them trying to shell it with artillery from the hills or destroyers running down the channel they called the Slot. We called it something else, something I won't repeat, but it described pretty accurately how we felt about the whole situation. My squad leader was Sergeant Kowalski, a Polish kid from Chicago who'd lied about his age to enlist and somehow ended up being one of the best natural fighters I ever saw. He had this way of moving through the jungle without making a sound, like he'd grown up in forests instead of city streets, and he could read terrain better than most officers. He's the one who kept me alive through those first weeks, teaching me things they never covered at Paris Island. "Don't step on fallen branches," he told me during my first patrol. "Don't brush against vines unless you know what you're doing. Don't drink from streams without purification tablets. Don't take your boots off unless you're ready to spend 10 minutes checking for leeches. And most important, don't ever assume you're alone out there, because the Japs own this jungle at night and they're everywhere during the day." The patrols started almost immediately. Every morning, different squads would head out into the jungle to probe for Japanese positions, look for supply caches, try to make contact and figure out where they were massing for their next push against the perimeter. It was miserable, dangerous work, humping through undergrowth so thick you sometimes cut your way forward a few feet at a time, never knowing if the next step would trigger an ambush or land you in a swamp or take you face first into a Japanese patrol coming the other way. My Thompson became my best friend out there. I learned every part of that weapon, could break it down and reassemble it blindfolded, knew the feel of a loaded magazine versus an empty one just by the weight. The 30-round stick magazines were more reliable than the 50-round drums, even though the drums looked cooler and held more ammunition. I carried 6 stick mags in a canvas pouch on my belt, plus 1 in the weapon, and I'd spend every spare minute cleaning the gun because the humidity and jungle rot could turn metal to rust overnight. The first time I fired it in anger was during a firefight near the Tenaroo River, about 2 weeks after I arrived. We'd been sent to reinforce a position that was taking harassing fire, and as we moved up, Japanese soldiers started shooting at us from spider holes we couldn't even see until we were right on top of them. I remember squeezing the trigger and feeling the Thompson come alive in my hands. The rapid crack, crack, crack of 45 caliber rounds punching through bamboo and palm fronds. The sweet smell of burned powder mixing with jungle rot. I don't know if I hit anything that first time, probably not, but the volume of fire made them stop shooting at us long enough to pull back. Kowalski found me afterwards, sitting against a tree and trying to get my hands to stop shaking. "You did good," he said, which was about as much praise as he ever gave anyone. "Next time, shorter bursts. The Thompson climbs on you if you hold the trigger too long." He showed me how to fire in 3 or 4 round bursts, how to control the muzzle rise, how to transition between targets without wasting ammunition on empty jungle. The nights were worse than the days. The Japanese loved to infiltrate at night, crawling through our perimeter to cut throats or throw grenades, or just make noise to keep us from sleeping. You'd be on watch in your foxhole, straining to see anything in the darkness, and you'd hear sounds that might be wind in the palms, or might be enemy soldiers moving toward you. Sometimes they'd yell in English, trying to draw fire so they could pinpoint our positions. "Marine, you die," or "Blood for the Emperor," or just horrible screaming that didn't sound human at all. They hit us hard on October 13th with a massive artillery barrage from positions near Point Cruz. Shells walking across Henderson Field and our encampments, turning the night into something out of hell, with explosions throwing dirt and shrapnel and pieces of things you didn't want to identify. We spent 6 hours in our holes while the Japanese pounded us, and in the morning the airfield looked like the surface of the moon, craters everywhere, wrecked planes scattered like broken toys. That's when we knew they were coming, that this was the preliminary bombardment for a major push. For the next 2 weeks we fought them constantly. They'd attack at night in human waves, screaming and charging our positions, and we'd cut them down with machine gun fire and mortars and anything else we could throw at them. During the day, we'd send out patrols to clear the jungle and find their staging areas. That's when I got promoted to corporal. Not because I'd done anything special, just because Corporal Davis caught a bullet through the throat during a night attack and someone had to take his place. The patrol that changed everything happened on October 28th, almost 7 weeks after I'd arrived. Sergeant Kowalski came around at 400 hours, waking us up in the darkness before dawn. "We got a job," he said quietly. "Intelligence thinks there's a Japanese supply dump about 2 clicks southwest of here, near the Matanikau. We're going out to confirm and destroy if possible." There were 8 of us, Kowalski leading, me as second in command with my Thompson, 4 riflemen with M1 Garands, 1 guy with a bar and a radio man carrying a TBX set that weighed almost 40 pounds. We moved out at first light, heading into the jungle single file, weapons at the ready. I was walking point, about 10 yards ahead of the main group, watching for tripwires and spider holes and any sign of Japanese presence. The jungle was alive with sound that morning, birds calling, insects buzzing, the rustle of things moving through the undergrowth. But there was something else too, something wrong that I couldn't quite identify, like the jungle was holding its breath. Kowalski must have felt it too because he hand-signaled for everyone to slow down, move more carefully, keep intervals. We'd been walking for maybe 90 minutes, cutting our way through a particularly dense section of bamboo and vine, when I saw it, a piece of disturbed earth that didn't look natural, too regular, like someone had dug there recently. I raised my fist to signal halt and dropped to one knee, studying the ground. There were marks in the mud, boot prints that weren't American issue, smaller and with a different tread pattern, fresh, maybe hours old. Kowalski crawled up next to me. "Jap's been through here," he whispered. "Recently." He scanned the jungle ahead, his eyes narrowed. "Could be we're close to that supply dump, or could be we just walked into their patrol route." He made a decision. "We keep moving, but weapons hot. Safety off? Finger on the trigger." I nodded and stood up slowly, Thompson ready, scanning the thick vegetation ahead. The bamboo was so dense in places you couldn't see more than 10 or 15 feet, and the undergrowth was waist-high, perfect for concealment. Every shadow looked like a soldier. Every rustling leaf sounded like someone chambering a round. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. We pushed forward maybe another 100 yards, moving through a narrow trail that wound between massive trees with roots like walls. That's when it happened. I saw movement to my left, just a flicker of khaki fabric behind a fern, and my brain processed it a split second before the world exploded. The ambush was perfect, textbook, probably planned by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. They'd set up in a horseshoe formation, letting us walk right into the kill zone before opening up with everything they had. Machine gun fire erupted from 3 directions at once, bullets snapping through the air with that distinctive crack that means they're close, really close, so close you can feel the supersonic waves. Bamboo exploded into splinters all around us, and I heard someone scream behind me. I didn't think, just reacted, dropping flat and rolling left behind a tree trunk that was probably only a foot wide but felt like a fortress in that moment. My Thompson was already coming up, and I was firing before I even had a clear target, just pumping rounds into the vegetation where I'd seen that movement, seeing leaves and branches disintegrate, hearing someone yell in Japanese. "Contact front," Kowalski was shouting. "Contact left, contact right. We're in the pocket, get out, get out." He was laying down suppressing fire with his M1, the distinctive ping of Garand rounds mixing with the chatter of their Nambu machine gun and the crack of Arisaka rifles. The bar gunner, a kid from Tennessee named Matthews, started returning fire. That beautiful heavy thudding of the Browning cutting through the bamboo like a scythe. I could see traces from the Japanese machine gun now. Green streaks coming from a position maybe 30 yards ahead and slightly elevated. They had high ground, they had numbers, and they had us dead to rights. I changed magazines, my hands moving on automatic while my brain was somewhere else entirely. Some primal place that was all instinct and survival. Slap the empty mag release. Pull. Insert fresh magazine. Slap the bolt home. Fire. The Thompson roared, the butt plate hammering against my shoulder, brass ejecting in a golden stream. I was aiming at muzzle flashes now, short controlled bursts like Kowalski had taught me, walking the fire across their position. Someone hit the dirt next to me. It was Wilson, one of the riflemen, blood streaming down his face from a scalp wound. "They're behind us too," he shouted over the gunfire. "We're surrounded." He was right. I could hear shooting from our rear now. More Japanese soldiers cutting off our retreat, trapping us in the kill zone. This was it, I thought. This is where it ends. 19 years old, never kissed a girl properly, never finished high school, going to die in a jungle on an island I couldn't find on a map 6 months ago. The Thompson was getting hot in my hands, the barrel starting to glow faintly. I'd gone through 3 magazines already, 90 rounds, and I could see Japanese soldiers now. Actual human shapes moving through the undergrowth, trying to flank us, trying to close the noose. Kowalski was still shouting orders, trying to organize a defense, but we were losing. The radio man was hit, I heard him cry out, and our bar gunner was firing slower now, probably running low on ammunition. The Nambu machine gun kept hammering away, and I saw Private Carson take rounds across his chest. Watched him spin and fall, his M1 flying from his hands. That's when something inside me snapped, not broke, but transformed. Turned from fear into something cold and hard and focused. I stopped thinking about dying and started thinking about killing, about making them pay for every Marine they'd hit, about survival through violence. I loaded my 4th magazine, the one with the red paint mark that meant it was my last fresh one, and I stood up. "Covering fire!" I screamed, and I started moving toward the machine gun position, firing the Thompson from the hip, holding the trigger down now, fuck the short bursts. Just laying down a wall of lead. The 45 slugs tore through bamboo like it wasn't there. I could see them impact on tree trunks. See bark explode, see a Japanese soldier's chest dissolve into red mist when I walked the fire across him. Matthews saw what I was doing and added his bar to the suppression, and suddenly we had momentum. I was running now, Thompson blazing, screaming something wordless, and I saw the machine gun position clearly for the first time. 2 soldiers behind a fallen log, one feeding the belt, one firing. The feeder looked up and saw me coming, his eyes going wide, and I put a burst into him that threw him backwards. The gunner tried to swing the Nambu toward me, but he was too slow, and I was too close, and the Thompson was still firing. I saw the rounds hit him, saw his body jerk with the impacts, saw the gun go silent. Then I was past them, rolling into cover behind their log, and I could see down the trail now, see 3 more Japanese soldiers trying to work their way around our flank. My Thompson was empty. I dropped the magazine, fumbled for my second-to-last mag, the one that had been in my pouch longest and might have feed issues, slammed it home. The bolt rode forward and I came up firing, catching the closest soldier center mass, watching him fold. The other 2 scattered, and I could hear Kowalski rallying the others, pushing forward now that the machine gun was silent. The firefight lasted maybe another 5 minutes, but it felt like hours. We cleared the ambush site methodically, Kowalski and Matthews covering while Wilson and I moved forward, clearing bodies, making sure no one was playing dead. There were 11 Japanese soldiers, all of them KIA now. We'd lost 3 Marines, Carson, the radio man, whose name I'm ashamed to say I never learned, and Roberts, who'd been hit during the first burst and died quietly while we were fighting. We found the supply dump about a quarter-mile past the ambush site, exactly where intelligence had said it would be. Rice bags, ammunition crates, medical supplies, all cached under camouflage netting. We couldn't carry it, didn't have time to destroy it properly. So Kowalski called in the location on our backup radio, and we got orders to RTB immediately. The walk back was a nightmare. We had to carry the bodies, couldn't leave them for the Japanese to mutilate, and we were all running on adrenaline and fear and exhaustion. I kept my Thompson ready the whole way, finger on the trigger, eyes scanning the jungle, certain we'd get hit again. But we made it back to the perimeter just after 1400 hours, and when we stumbled through the wire, I finally let myself believe we were going to live. The debrief was quick and professional. Kowalski reported the action, I confirmed details. They took our weapons for cleaning and inspection. My Thompson's barrel was so hot it had started to discolor, and the armorer who checked it whistled low. "You put some serious work through this weapon," he said. "How many magazines?" I told him 6, maybe 7, I'd lost count. "That's over 200 rounds," he said. "Lucky it didn't melt on you." They gave me a bronze star for that action, for conspicuous gallantry in the face of the enemy, but I didn't feel gallant. I felt sick and scared and grateful to be breathing. The citation said I'd single-handedly neutralized an enemy machine gun position, which makes it sound heroic instead of desperate. What really happened was, I got angry enough to stop being paralyzed by fear, and I had a Thompson submachine gun that let me turn that anger into something the enemy couldn't ignore. I spent 3 more months on Guadalcanal after that, fighting through the final Japanese evacuation, watching them pull back in the night rather than face complete annihilation. We'd won, supposedly, held the island and the airfield, turned the tide of the war in the Pacific. But standing there in February of 1943, watching the last Japanese barges disappear into the darkness, I didn't feel like a victor. I felt like a survivor, someone who'd seen and done things that changed him fundamentally. The nightmares started about a week after we were rotated to Australia for rest and refit. I'd wake up screaming, back in that bamboo forest, hearing the Nambu machine gun, seeing faces I'd shot at close range. The Thompson's chatter became a soundtrack to my dreams, and I couldn't close my eyes without seeing muzzle flashes and blood spray. The Navy doctors called it battle fatigue and gave me pills that didn't help, and after a while, I just learned to live with it. I went back into combat after Australia, fought at Cape Gloucester and Peleliu, got wounded twice more and promoted to sergeant. But nothing was ever as visceral, as purely terrifying, as that morning in the Guadalcanal jungle when 8 Marines walked into a perfect ambush and 5 walked out. I fired my Thompson on plenty of other occasions, killed men in other battles, but that first real test, that first time I understood what Harkness meant about getting close, that never left me. I kept the Thompson through the rest of the war, the same weapon with the same serial number, even though regulations said I should turn it in for maintenance rotation. I cleaned that gun obsessively, treated it better than I treated myself, because in some superstitious way I believed it had kept me alive and would continue to do so. When the war ended and they made us turn in our weapons for demobilization, I actually cried a little, standing in that processing line at Camp Pendleton, watching an armorer take my Thompson and toss it onto a pile with 100 others. I came home to Nebraska in November of 1945, 22 years old but feeling 50, and I tried to explain to my parents and my girl and my friends what it had been like. But how do you describe the sound of 45 caliber slugs tearing through bamboo and men? How do you explain what it feels like to kill someone at 10 yards, close enough to see their expression change from determination to shock to nothing. How do you tell people about the weight of a Thompson submachine gun, which is really the weight of survival and death and moral compromise all forged together? I couldn't, so I stopped trying. I'd got a job at the grain elevator, married Linda from high school, had 3 kids who grew up wondering why their father sometimes woke up screaming about machine guns and bamboo. I joined the VFW and sat through meetings where other veterans talked about their experiences, and sometimes I'd share a little bit, just enough to keep the memories from eating me alive entirely. Years passed, decades. The nightmares became less frequent, but never disappeared completely. Sometimes I'd be at the grocery store or watching television or sitting in church, and something would trigger it, a loud noise or a certain smell or just the way shadows fell. And suddenly I'd be back there, 19 years old, firing a Thompson at shapes in the jungle, watching the world explode around me. I'm 98 years old now, writing this down because my granddaughter said it was important to record these things before all us World War II veterans are gone. She doesn't understand that I've spent 80 years trying to forget, but maybe she's right. Maybe someone should know what it was really like, not the sanitized movie version, not the heroic narrative, but the truth of it. The truth is that war is men killing other men in terrible ways, and sometimes the men doing the killing are just scared kids with dangerous weapons, and sometimes those weapons are Thompson submachine guns that fire 45 caliber rounds fast enough to tear through bamboo and flesh like they're the same thing. The truth is that you don't forget, you don't move on, you don't heal. You just learn to live with it, carry it, hide it from people who can't possibly understand. The truth is that I can still feel that Thompson in my hands if I close my eyes, still feel the recoil, still smell the cordite, still hear the screams. I killed men that day in October of 1942, killed them up close with a weapon designed for exactly that purpose, and those men haunt me in ways I don't have words to describe. They were the enemy. They were trying to kill me and my fellow Marines, and I did what I had to do. But that doesn't make it clean, doesn't make it easy, doesn't make it anything other than what it was. Carnage in a jungle on an island most people have never heard of. The Thompson was a hell of a weapon, perfectly designed for close-quarters combat in dense terrain. Those 45 caliber slugs had shocking power, could punch through cover that rifle rounds might penetrate but not neutralize threats behind. The high rate of fire, around 700 rounds per minute in the M1A1 model I carried, meant you could put a lot of lead downrange very quickly, which, in an ambush situation, might be the difference between dying and surviving. The weight was substantial, yes, but that same weight helped control the recoil, kept the muzzle down during sustained fire. But it was also loud, incredibly loud, and the muzzle blast in confined jungle spaces could be disorienting. The magazines were never quite reliable enough, especially in humid environments where rust was a constant battle. The weapon required constant maintenance, more than a rifle, because the tolerances were tighter and the mechanism more complex. And it went through ammunition at an alarming rate, which meant you were always counting rounds, always thinking about when you'd run dry, always scared of that moment when you pulled the trigger and nothing happened. I remember one time, must have been November on Guadalcanal, we were on night watch and I heard movement outside the perimeter. I brought up my Thompson and squeezed the trigger and got nothing, just a dead click. The magazine had rusted through at the feed lips, something I'd somehow missed during my obsessive cleaning routine. I cleared it, slammed in a fresh magazine, and thank God it was just a wild pig and not Japanese infiltrators, or I'd have died right there because of a corroded magazine. That's what people don't understand about combat. It's not just about courage or tactics or training. It's about maintenance and luck, and split-second decisions and random chance. It's about having a weapon that works when you need it to work, ammunition that feeds properly, magazines that don't fail at the critical moment. It's about being in the right place or the wrong place at the right time or the wrong time, and you never know which until it's too late to change anything. The Japanese soldier I killed first, the one manning the machine gun, I can still see his face. He was young, maybe younger than me, with glasses that caught the light wrong and gave away his position. When the 45 rounds hit him, he didn't die heroically or dramatically. He just stopped, like someone had turned off a switch and fell sideways into the dirt. I remember thinking he looked surprised, like he couldn't believe this was happening, like he'd had plans for after the war, same as me. I don't know his name. Don't know if he had a family waiting for him in Japan, if he had a girl he wrote letters to, if he had dreams about what he'd do when the fighting was over. I just know that I killed him with a Thompson submachine gun on a morning in October of 1942, and that he's been with me ever since, along with all the others whose faces I can't forget and whose names I never knew. People talk about the greatest generation, about heroes and sacrifice and duty, and I understand why. We did stop fascism. We did fight for something important. We did make the world safer in some fundamental way. But the cost was terrible, not just in lives lost, but in lives damaged, in minds broken, in souls scarred by things no human should have to do to another human. I did my duty. I served honorably. I killed the enemy when I had to kill them, and I brought my Marines home when I could bring them home. But I also carry the weight of it, every day, every night, in dreams and memories and moments of dissociation, when the present disappears, and I'm back in that jungle, finger on the trigger, watching men die. The Thompson submachine gun was the finest close-quarters weapon of its era, and I'm grateful I had it when I needed it. It saved my life multiple times, kept me breathing when I should have died, gave me the firepower to punch through ambushes and firefights and desperate situations, but it was also the instrument through which I did terrible things, necessary things, things that haunt me still. That's the truth of it. That's what my granddaughter wanted me to write down. Not the glory or the heroism or the sanitized version, but the real story of a 19-year-old kid from Nebraska who found himself in hell with a Thompson in his hands and the choice between killing and dying. I chose to live, chose to fight, chose to pull that trigger over and over again, and I've been living with that choice ever since. Guadalcanal ended in February of 1943, but in a very real way I never left that island. Part of me is still there, still walking point through bamboo forests, still scanning the jungle for movement, still feeling the weight of that Thompson, and knowing that in the next second I might have to use it. The war ended 80 years ago. But some wars never really end, they just become part of who you are, woven into your DNA, inseparable from your identity. I'm glad I survived. I'm grateful for the life I've had, the wife I loved, the children we raised, the quiet decades in Nebraska doing honest work and living peacefully. But I also carry ghosts, and those ghosts have weight, and that weight never gets lighter no matter how many years pass. The Thompson's weight was 11 pounds. The weight of what I did with it is immeasurable. If you're reading this and you're thinking about joining the military, or you're facing the possibility of combat, understand this. Weapons like the Thompson are tools, efficient tools, necessary tools even. But they're tools for killing human beings, and killing human beings changes you in ways you can't predict or control or undo. You can justify it, you can rationalize it, you can know intellectually that it was necessary and right and proper, but you still have to live with it afterwards. I don't regret my service. I don't regret fighting fascism. I don't regret being a Marine or going to the Pacific or defending Henderson Field, but I do carry the weight of every trigger pull, every burst of fire, every man I saw fall because I put rounds into him. That weight is real, it's heavy, and it never goes away. The Thompson submachine gun, with its .45 caliber slugs, and its reliable action and its devastating close-range effectiveness, was exactly the weapon I needed in that Guadalcanal jungle. It tore through bamboo and men with equal efficiency, and it kept me alive when I should have died. I'm grateful for that weapon, respectful of that weapon, haunted by that weapon, all at the same time, forever, until I die and maybe even after. That's my testimony. That's what happened when the Japanese ambushed my patrol in the Guadalcanal jungle in October of 1942. That's what it felt like to fire a Thompson in anger, to watch those slugs impact, to survive through violence and live with the aftermath. I was 19 years old and I'm 98 years old, and somehow I'm both ages simultaneously, forever trapped in that moment when everything changed and nothing could ever be the same again.